All right, so welcome again. So tonight, today, depending on where you are, we are going to look at another case scenario in regard to our database schema. So as you can see, I have a section whereby we need to make use of mappings of obtain data from two different tables. So in this case, you can see that we have a table known as film at line 137 of the create circular database schema.sql, and then this particular definition of the table has some other references to other tables. As you can see, it has some foreign constraints, which in this case is foreign key or film language. So it has some reference to some languages. So I want us to see how then can we be able to query data between the film itself and also the language itself. So that means we are going to come up with a few entities and just to represent that. So I'm going to look for the languages table, so which is going to be language. I'm going just to be specific and search for that. So you can see the language should be somewhere down here. So we are going just to create a simple table, which is going to be a language table. And in this case, we are going to use it to combine data and navigate through. So what I'm going to do first, let's quickly create a simple entity, which is going to be language.java. All right, so with this, we are just to copy everything that we had on the actor and get to this one and then update it. So I'm going just to copy all that. So you become a lazy developer once you start knowing where things are. So we are going to add all missing imports and all that. So once we have this one, we need to define the actual table. It's going to be language table. And in this case, we just need to introduce now the additional fields, which is going to be the language ID, the name, last update. So we need just those three fields. So and just to quickly define them here, and then for this we are just to quickly copy some of the fields here, just to update you. And then so let me just copy everything from the actor table and bring it here so that you can just update what we need. And then for our language ID is going to be the primary key, paste it here, and then this is going to be language ID, right, that way. Then we need the name of the language, so we are just to have that as name. Then we need the last update, which we already have down here, so we don't need this last name thing. So the next thing that we need to do is just fix the imports. All right, so I'm going just to format that and then we just import. So we just need to define these three fields, so the language ID, the column name, and then the last update. So the next thing that we need to define is the film. So we need the film itself, so film.java. So I'm going to have that. So copy almost everything from this site again, and then transfer it to film, and then have it there. So we are just to have this one as film. Alright, so I need to paste everything here. Alright, so ideally what we need to do is map this particular film table against the SQL database that we have here. So you can see we need all these particular fields and now their description and all of that. So what we need to do is now transfer this and map them into this particular Java object. I've already done this one beforehand just to save on time. So you just need to go through and confirm that everything is okay. So the integer original, we need double, so you can just have some spacing in between just for this particular one. So we have our two entities available, so quickly we can proceed and then now create our repositories for the two. So what we are going to do here is going to be create two repositories. One is going to be the language repository, language repository.java, and then this one is going to extend reactive CRUD, CRUD. So it's supposed to be an interface, remember, so that you can be able to get some inference. So reactive CRUD. So you need this particular reactive CRUD repository, and then you're going to have the language as the ID, and then the ID is going to be integer. So you need that. Alright, so the next thing that you're going to do is quickly copy paste this one, and then we can just rename it. So rename this one to be the film repository. Yeah, that one. Copy and then paste. So you can just rename it that way. And then this one is going to extend, and then you are going to have film instead of language. So film that way. So we are done with our repositories. So our repositories are ready. So what you just need to do is now expose a simple endpoint, which you'll be able to see how do we get the film data, whereby we combine to the two repositories together and find the data. So what you're going to do is make use of custom DTOs, or data objects, transfer objects, just to illustrate the process of mapping the film entities and the particular language together, and just mapping that to a list. So what you're going to do is just expose a simple controller, in this case, which is going to be a simple controller, and then we'll be able to have a simple service. So in this case, we are just to say film controller. So let's say we have the film controller.java, and then everything else, I'm going just to have simple things here. So I'm going just to quickly define a simple flux to list all the services. So what we are going to do is we are just to have a simple method here, and then from here, remember, we need to make this particular class an REST controller. So we just need to have a REST controller. Alright, and then from there we need a requests mapping. Then this particular mapping is going to be /API/version1/films. So that is how we are going to have as the base. Then from here, now instead of us having a flux of actors, we are going to have a flux of film entity. Alright, so from here, remember, we need now another service for that. So we are going to just have private film service. So you just to define it later, film service that way. And then from there we need a constructor. So we need this one to be final. So you can just have that down the way. So you need public film controller, this one, and then we expect to have a film service instance, which is going to be that. Then from there we just need to set this dot film service equal to film service that way. So once that is done, what you need to do is make use of the film service to list everything. So that means we need this particular class created, so you can make use of this simple adjustment here. So we just click on the bulb, create. So what you're going to do ideally is going to be in this case we need this particular class. So alt quick create a class film, but then we are going to create an interface, and this particular interface now we need just to drag it off to the service class, and we move it there, and then we'll be able to see. So in this case we have the film service on this side. Alright, so the next thing that you need to do is that the controller is still complaining. Now we have the film service, we don't have the method, so we are going to quick alt and create this particular method on the film service. So save that, and then quickly remove this yellow icon from here. And then looking at this, we have the list feeding on our film service. So what we are going to do lastly is going to implement this particular interface of the film service. And by on this one implementation folder, again, just to have another file .java, which is going to film service implementation.java. So select that, and then this one is going to implement. So it's going to say implement film film service interface. Alright, now you can see automatically it starts complaining because we need to handle this and implemented method. Then lastly, we need just to define this particular class as a service. So just need a notation of service that way. So in that way, we have the service ready and everything ready, but then we need now the actual implementation here. So for us to be able to do the actual implementation, we need two repositories. So the first one is going to be the film repository, another one is going to be the language repository. So we need to inject the two fields. So we are going to have private final film repository, and then it's going to be film repository. We also need to have private final language repository, that way. So then from here we need a constructor for this particular class. So I'm just showing you where we need more than one particular class of film service, and in this case we require this as the first entry. So we can just specify the order by ourselves. So we can just specify that. So we need those two repositories created, and then from there just need to initialize them. Those film repository equal to film repository, and then this dot language repository equal to language repository, that way. So we have our construction done. So the next thing that we need to do is how then are we going to use this particular data to do the mapping. So usually is that whenever you query the, first of all, we are going to just return the entire payload of films, and then we can see how then can we make use of the language repository to get the actual language name and make use of details. For now, we are just first to return the actual repository, returned data from the film repository dot list. Ideally it's going to be find all. So for now we are just to return this particular data. So you can see we haven't used the language repository. We are going to use that in the next session and highlight how then can we be able to make use of the two repositories together. Alright, so quickly, if you think we are good, we can start the application so that we can be able to give it a try. So I'm just to rerun the application once again. Everything is set, so we just need to rerun and wait for it to be up. Alright, so the application has started. Now what you need to do is just have another endpoint execution. So I'm just to copy this one for listing the actors, but then now down here we are just to have to do list actors. Now instead this one we are just to list films. So in this case we are just to say list films, so it to be /films. So that should be able to be good. So let's see, send a request, and you can see we got 500 error because you can see we have an issue because on our controller we didn't define the actual request mapping, which needs to be handled. In this case we need to make use of film service API v1 films. So let me see, as the request mapping, the get mapping to that endpoint. Alright, so it's complaining about what? So unresolved compilation problem. So it seems we have a compilation issue on this particular service. Looking at it clearly, we need just to quickly rerun the application once more so that we don't have a compilation error. So we can make use of the mvn command maven clean spring boot run run, that you can just run it using the new package. So I think it's using the cache. Alright, so it's compiling the sources once more, and it will be able to run the application. Alright, so the application has started. Now we can give it another try. So on the same endpoint, API v1 films. So let's send a request. We expect to have some data back. it's huge data. As you can see, we don't have any exception. It's going to be huge data ideally. Yeah, so you can see we got almost every individual field, and it's actually so huge. That's why you can see that it's so slow. All right. So one thing that you realize that now, whenever you're working with instances whereby you'll be able to have huge data, then you need a way of simplifying that in regard to doing something known as pagination. So as you can see here, we have the film ID, the title, description, the release here, the language ID and the original language ID, rental duration and the rental rate, and everything else is set. Then what we just need to do now in our next tutorial or section is going to be how then do we make this data paginated, and then at the same time we'll be able to see how then do we query. Instead of us having only the language ID, then we can have the language name from the ATA table coming through. Alright, so thanks for this one. I think we can proceed in our next session for the remainder of this particular concept.